Welcome to Echoes of Battle. In this video, we will be covering the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War. Thank you for watching and enjoy.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a gripping, absolutely chaotic two-day struggle that forever altered the Western theater of the American Civil War. We're talking about the Battle of Shiloh, fought back in April of 1862. It's a wild story of a massive surprise attack, sheer battlefield confusion, and a dramatic turning point that, honestly, nobody at the time saw coming. To really grasp the gravity of what we're about to unpack, consider this staggering number: 23,746. That represents the total human casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. And remember, that is over just 2 days of combat. It was a devastating, unprecedented scale of violence that fundamentally shocked the entire nation. It proved, without a doubt, that this wasn't going to be some quick, easy war. Because up to that point, Shiloh was literally the bloodiest battle in American history. So how did this horrific human cost actually happen? Well, we're going to trace the intense timeline of an early morning surprise, a desperate defensive stand, and a crushing counterstrike to find out. It all started with a high-stakes chess match. By early 1862, Union forces under Ulysses S. Grant were camped out at Pittsburg Landing. They were basically just waiting for General Don Carlos Buell's army to show up so they could join forces and attack the crucial Confederate railroad hub at Corinth, Mississippi. But Confederate General Sidney Johnston, he saw a fleeting window of opportunity. His strategy was simple but desperate. He absolutely had to annihilate Grant's forces before Buell's reinforcements could arrive. But you know, Mother Nature has a way of throwing a wrench into even the best laid plans. Johnston's 44,000 men marched out on April 3rd, but heavy, relentless rain turned the roads into an absolute muddy nightmare. Tens of thousands of men, their artillery, their supply wagons, they all just became hopelessly stuck. And this critical delay meant his troops, who were already exhausted and starving from poor rationing, couldn't actually launch their big surprise attack until the dawn of April 6th. Part 1. Day 1, the surprise attack. So picture this. The Union Army is camped near a small log meeting house called Shiloh Church. They had no advanced scouts out, so at dawn, they were caught completely off guard by a screaming Confederate assault. The attack initially drove the Union soldiers backward, but remarkably, the lines didn't just collapse. Instead, they acted almost like a stretched rubber band through the thick, smoky forests and ravines. They'd repeatedly fall back, halt, reorganize, and form these increasingly desperate defensive pockets. It was total chaos, with units getting separated and commanders completely unable to communicate in the dense woods. Now, the most famous of these stands happened in an area that quickly became known as the Hornets Nest. Union troops found themselves in a pretty strong defensive position in a field right next to a sunken road. The fighting here, it became so impossibly intense, and the sheer volume of incoming lead from musket fire was so deafening that surviving soldiers later said the flying mini-balls sounded exactly like a nest of angry hornets buzzing past their ears. For 7 grueling hours, the Union troops commanded by Generals Prentiss and Wallace held this brutal position. They endured anywhere from 12 to 14 separate, unrelenting Confederate charges. Think about that stamina. This stubborn resistance was incredibly costly in terms of lives, but it achieved something absolutely vital. It bogged down the Confederate momentum and bought critical time for General Grant to pull back and reorganize his battered forces closer to the river. To finally break the Hornets' Nest, the Confederates had to resort to just overwhelming firepower. General Ruggles massed a massive, concentrated bombardment from 50 cannons to basically rain fire down onto the Union pocket. Eventually, the immense pressure and artillery fire forced the surviving Union troops in the nest to surrender. But, their enormous sacrifice had already altered the trajectory of the entire battle. And while the Hornets' Nest was fiercely holding on, a devastating blow struck the Confederate leadership. General Sidney Johnston, who was the highly respected senior commander in the West, was personally out there directing troops on the front lines. Tragically, he was struck right behind the knee by a mini-ball. The bullet severed a major artery, and Johnston bled to death right there on the battlefield. This was a catastrophic loss of leadership exactly when the Confederate attack was starting to get disorganized. Which brings us to a dramatic pivot point as night falls. The situation on the ground was, frankly, deceiving. The Confederates, now under the command of P.G.T. Beauregard, were totally exhausted, disorganized, and literally scavenging for food in captured Union camps. Beauregard confidently believed he had won the battle. But Grant's battered army had actually formed a very strong defensive perimeter back at Pittsburg Landing, backed by steep ravines, 50 cannons, and massive Union gunboats right on the Tennessee River. And the night itself, it was an absolute nightmare. Just picture heavy thunderstorms, pouring rain, and thousands of wounded soldiers agonizing in the freezing mud. It's horrific to think about. But under the cover of this miserable darkness, the entire dynamic of the battle shifted. Lew Wallace's delayed troops finally reached the battlefield around 7 p.m. And even more significantly, Don Carlos Buell's army of 15,000 fresh men began crossing the river to join up with Grant's lines. Part 2, Day 2, the Union Strike. So as dawn broke on April 7th, the strategic situation had completely reversed overnight. Grant was now commanding over 54,000 fresh and reorganized men, and they were going up against Beauregard's completely exhausted force of roughly 34,000. So instead of sitting back and waiting for the Confederates to attack again, Grant seized the initiative. He launched a massive, crushing counterattack southward. The Confederates thought back bitterly, for sure. They launched several of their own counterattacks, but they were just simply too exhausted and too outnumbered. By late afternoon, faced with the very real threat of total destruction, Beauregard came to the stark realization that victory was no longer on the table. He ordered a bitter withdrawal back south toward Corinth, yielding the incredibly bloody battlefield to Grant. Part 3. The bloodiest battle yet. So the fighting was over, but the grim reality was really just setting in. Over 23,000 total casualties in just 2 days of fighting. Tens of thousands of ordinary soldiers, many experiencing the horrific reality of massed artillery, shattered forests, and desperate close-range slaughter for the very first time, paid the ultimate price. These numbers proved to everyone, both North and South, that this conflict was going to be a long, drawn-out war of attrition. In the aftermath, Ulysses S. Grant's reputation became a fierce battleground of its own. He was heavily criticized by the public and the press for allowing his army to be surprised in the first place, a point, by the way, that historians are literally still debating today. But Shiloh really cemented his defining characteristic as a military leader. When pushed to the absolute brink of destruction, Grant refused to panic. He refused to surrender. He proved he could absorb enormous pressure, reorganize his forces, and aggressively attack again. Shiloh's true macro-level legacy was profound. Surviving this battle kept Grant's southern momentum alive. It sparked this massive chain reaction. Holding the line at Shiloh directly allowed the Union to capture the vital railroad hub of Corinth by May. And this continuous southward push eventually led to the siege of Vicksburg in 1863, which of course gave the Union control of the Mississippi River and quite literally split the Confederacy right in half. And it leaves us with a fascinating, haunting question about the razor-thin margins of history. The Confederates came remarkably close to destroying Grant's army on that very first day. So how might the entire American Civil War have changed if just a single bullet hadn't struck Albertson v. Johnston? Or if a single rainstorm hadn't delayed the Confederate march by 2 crucial days? It's a powerful reminder that history often pivots on the smallest, most unpredictable moments. Thanks for joining me on this explainer into the Battle of Shiloh. Keep questioning and keep learning.
Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe, and thank you. Have a great day.